country they live in. It was only on Monday, don't forget, that the Buckingham Palace told us that the Queen wasn't going to go to Sandringham as she had intended to in this time of year. So, it's another year of change and of uncertainty, I think, for a number of people.
Chris Ship, ITV's Royal Editor, thank you so much for joining us and kicking off the discussion, responding to the Queen's speech earlier. Very, very grateful. Taking your calls on 0345 6060 973. It's been a tough year, but as the Queen said, there is much to be
In 300 yards, slide right onto Causeway, A312.
Did Her Majesty's speech give you hope? What are your reactions to what she said? How do you feel this Christmas Day, looking into 2022? Call me on 0345 6060 973. It's David Lammy here on LBC and the
Take the next right onto Causeway, A312.
Is LBC.
For those moments when you start boiling the water, but forget the pasta.
Gorilla's here.
Continue on A312 for 1 mile.
Of bed.
Gorilla's here.
When you forget to pick up the dog food. And for when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Gorillas will bring the sugar in minutes.
Gorilla's here.
Download Gorillas for groceries delivered in minutes. Use the code FAST to get £10 off your first 4 orders. Minimum spend of £20. T&Cs apply. Please check availability in your area. Gorillas, faster than you.
Struggling to get your instrument to perform in the moment. Do something about it, without the awkward conversations or silences. Perform when you need to with Newman. Clinically proven treatment, order online, discreetly delivered to your door. Visit newman.com today, NUMAN.com.
Hi, I'm Dr. Nikki Kanani, GP and Medical Director of Primary Care in England. Omicron cases are rising fast, so it's good that 12 to 15-year-olds can now get a second COVID-19 vaccine. Vaccines give your children the best possible protection against the virus. Get your 12 to 15-year-old vaccinated before term, or as soon as it's been 12 weeks after their first dose. Book online or find your nearest walk-in centre at nhs.uk/COVID vaccination.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, with David Lammy.
Inspired by the Queen's message of hope, we're talking about hope in this hour. What are your hopes for 2022, despite the tough year that many of you will have had in 2021? And did you draw inspiration from Her Majesty's speech and her message of hope earlier? Taking your calls on 0345 6060 973, or you can text me at 84850 or tweet me at LBC. Jilly in Loughborough. Jilly, thank you so much for calling in. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you, David. I've got to say thank you so much. That's my first, because I listened to you, I think it was in the middle of the year, and you did a big part about homeless people.
I do
And you
remember that
said-
show on it. I think it was
Yeah.
Saturday, yeah.
I was gripped by it, and I thought, well, I've tried everything else, so I couldn't get anywhere. So I contacted my MP. And within a week of doing so,
In 300 yards, at Wagoners Roundabout, take the second exit onto the Parkway, A312.
moved in on the 13th of December, so I spent Christmas in a flat.
Jilly, so what was your situation? You were homeless at the point you were listening to the show, were you?
Yes, I was, yes. Well, basically, I just went with a friend, a companionship more than relationship, and he passed away, so I was left alone in a caravan, would you believe?
Exit the roundabout onto the Parkway.
No gas, no water, no...
Continue on the Parkway for 1 mile.
Yes, there
What
was
situation?
18 months.
18 months in a caravan, no
Yeah.
water, no lighting, no gas.
No.
Jilly, it's
I literally
I'm not
went
going to
to
ask you how
Greg.
old you are without, because it's terrible,
No,
really.
I'm 55. 55.
So,
Oh no, I will.
and so you had LBC on the radio in the caravan,
And I listen to you.
and you
David, you've cost me a fortune in batteries.
I feel like I should take your address and send you a check. Just remind me about the show. Remind me about that hour in which I was talking about homelessness, because you know the thing about doing LBC, and it's a bit like, in some ways, listening to the Queen. It's earlier on today. It's not.
In a quarter of a mile, at Cranford Parkway interchange, take the second exit onto the M4 slip road to Heathrow Airport, M25.
And you know, a lot of people think politicians like the sound of their own voice, so I can sort of talk the hind legs off a donkey. But actually, what LBC is really about is listening. It's about the amazing people that call in, and that often triggers you. You know, and you sort of all I'm doing is leading that conversation, as it were.
Yes, you are, David. And
Exit the roundabout onto the slip road. In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M4.
down the normal route, filling in the application forms, etc., etc. And then you came on, and I was in tears that night, and I thought, there's got to be something that will help me. There's got to be someone somewhere. And from that night on, you gave me hope, because I'm not kidding you, I was ready to give up. I was ready. And the only reason I didn't was because my cat starved. Isn't it funny?
Well,
And
no,
I
it's not
thought,
funny.
right,
My dog Silver got me through last week.
Continue on M4 for 3 miles.
And I felt particularly, you know, my youngest she was 6 last year, and I just felt so bad to have a Christmas without, you know, with a 6-year-old, the joy of a 6-year-old, and I wasn't with her, and my dog Silver got me through, so I totally understand that. Really?
well, there's an interesting, well, I've got another cat now. Someone's gone into hospital and said, we look after it. Well, I've not seen it since it arrived. So that's another, but I know it's useless. And it's eaten, so I'm happy. But like I say, I'm in a 1-bed flat. I'm very happy. And if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have even thought of going down that route.
Jenny, you're in a 1-bed flat. The council has come to your aid, I hope. I imagine it's the council. You've got in touch with your MP, and your MP helped out. Who was your MP? Let's say who your MP was.
Jane Hunt.
Jane Hunt.
Yeah, I don't even know what party she's from, to be fair.
She's not in my party.
I know.
But that just goes to tell you. That just goes to tell you that it's really important to say this. You know, of course, we have these disagreements that are political about the way we want to run our country. But in my experience, every MP I've met wants to do the very best for their constituents. If you've got a problem, drop them an email, drop them a line.
I think that though.
I'm sure, you know, there'll be people listening in Uxbridge at the moment, and they may have had calls to reach out to Boris. They won't necessarily have reached out to him for the most political of things. I would hope that Boris takes the business of serving the people of Uxbridge as seriously as I certainly take the business of serving the people of Tottenham, and I've got no reason to believe that he doesn't.
Can I ask you 2 quick questions?
You can do. I can try.
Go on then. Would you think about being Prime Minister?
Why you put me on the spot on this Christmas? This Christmas spoil it.
Okay, what do you think about Andy?
I would think about Keir Starmer being Prime Minister. That's what I want. Keir Starmer's becoming Prime Minister. And I tell you what, my wife's listening to the show at home, and she would have just, she'd be sort of having a cup of tea, and she'd have just sort of, you know, would have
Okay then, what do you think about Andy Burnham?
Oh, Andy Burnham's a very good chap. He's a very dear friend of mine. I've known him many years. He's doing a great job.
I love it. I like him.
He's the mayor of...
In a quarter of a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
he's doing a wonderful job.
Do you think he would run for it?
home soon because we want gear stuff. Jilly,
You don't want to take all this rubbish.
Keep right to stay on M4.
get me into trouble on Christmas Day. But look, I am genuinely so. I've got a feeling you might drop me an email, Jilly, by the way. But I am so pleased that it worked out for you. I'm pleased that as you head into 2022, that you've got some warmth and comfort in a place that you can call your home, and that you're not in that caravan without water, without, utilities, feeling as low as you were feeling, and that LBC made the difference. Jenny, thank you so much for calling in. Please call in on 0345 6060 973. You can register your call and I'll come back to you in the next hour. Let's talk about hope. Jilly's just given me a hell of a lot of hope. Wonderful, wonderful Christmas story. Please share with us. After the break, I've got a Christmas treat for you. My conversation with Stephen McGann, the actor who plays Dr. Turner in Call the Midwife. You're listening to David Lammy here on LBC. It's 6:30 and it's time for the news with Paul Jones.
A man has been arrested on suspicion of having an offensive weapon on the grounds of Windsor Castle, where the Queen is staying. There was a security breach this morning, but we're told no buildings were entered and the royal family has been informed. The Queen has used her Christmas Day address to remember her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. She says since the death of her beloved Philip, she's drawn great comfort from the warmth and affection of the many tributes to his life and work. The world's most powerful telescope has been launched into space. The James Webb Space Telescope has been designed to answer unsolved questions about the universe. The UK Space Agency says it will look further back in time than ever before. The weather: rain will move northeastwards across Northern Ireland, Wales and England tonight, reaching Scotland later. Rain will fall as sleet or snow in northern areas with blizzards over hills, drier elsewhere, a low of -3.
This is LBC.
Snow's falling on an old red brick apartment block. Inside, Christmas is in full swing. Line number 12, hawks crackling as hope is fizzling. In 45, the table is being extended for the extended family. And Christmas puddings are being ignited.
In a quarter of a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
Omicron COVID-19 is spreading fast. Every adult in the country now needs to get a COVID-19 booster vaccine because
Keep right to stay on M4.
protection against catching Omicron. Boosters give you the best possible protection against the virus and should significantly reduce your risk.
Continue on M4 for 4 miles.
Strengthen your protection and get boosted now. Visit nhs.uk/COVID vaccination.
At Honda, we listen to the unexpected for inspiration. Like feet. All that tapping, stepping, stopping and starting, that's a lot of energy. Energy that could be used to charge a battery. The new Honda CR-V Hybrid turns braking into charge for a more efficient drive. Which means less stopping for fuel. Honda, the power of dreams.
It was just another day in another week for Jenny. But as she listened to the radio, she was suddenly filled with an urge to escape. So Jenny pressed the green button and flew to Ireland's wild Atlantic Way. She met the friendly locals of Cork's famous English market, indulged in the delicious fresh seafood of Galway, and explored the dramatic coastlines and picturesque landscapes of Donegal. Press the green button and fly to Ireland's wild Atlantic Way this winter. Just over an hour from London's Stansted Airport.
This is LBC with David Lammy. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850.
Back to your calls shortly on hope for the future as we head in towards 2022 and off the back of the Queen's message of hope earlier today. But my wife and I are huge fans of Call the Midwife. And I will be watching Call the Midwife when I get back home tonight. It's become central appointment viewing for us on Christmas Day. So I was thrilled to speak to Stephen McGann, the actor who plays Dr. Turner in the series a little bit earlier this month. I started off by asking him, what's the success?
It's amazing, isn't it, David? And you know what? I so often get asked, what's the secret? You know, and in television, of course, like in many walks of life, people want to believe that there's some formula or there's some kind of necromancy where we are doing this clever thing that's manipulating people. And you know, the truth is actually lovelier, I think, and simpler. I don't think we're doing anything particularly clever, but the success is coming from the people themselves.
In 2 miles, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
Something better in themselves, something that lies within themselves, and it's making people respond. And I think that's about kindness and community and caring for each other, maybe just a little bit better than we do. And when I've watched on Inside over the years, we cry at the show as well. And I began to realise as the years went on, I thought, you know, it's actually much bigger and more simple than those ideas about secret formulas. And I know the TV companies, they've looked for it and tried to think, oh, what's the formula? And actually, I think we're all part of it. The people who make it, as well as the people who watch it, are part of a story about community. That is making, when I get the script, I cry. When Heidi writes the script, she cries. Because I think it speaks to something in our past, something that was created, that basically was about caring for each other that bit better, about what do we do for the weakest of us, what do we do, whoever you are, doesn't matter who you are or what you think, how can we care about you that bit better? And therefore, it's all of the things that we all hold in common. And I think that's what makes people cry, because there's a kind of catharsis in that, a cleansing when people watch it, of saying, yes, that's community. That's what I want to feel like. I want to feel better than I do now. I think that's a part of it.
Tell us, the Christmas special that we can look forward to tomorrow.
Yeah.
What year are we in?
Don't you get me on this now. So we are in Christmas.
In a 1/4 mile, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
The end of 66 now, we're piling on through these years like nobody's business. But this Christmas special, I love this one. It's great. It's got so much incident in it. And when I was first watching
Exit at junction 6.
I thought, oh no, I'm already crying, and there's this bit to go. I really got to that bit, you know. And of course you can never see.
In a 1/4 mile, at the roundabout, take the 3rd exit onto Tuns Lane, A355.
And you go to hard places as well, but everybody's there, everybody's funny, and shall I say, it ends in the most spectacular and wonderful, iconic Call the Midwife fashion.
Oh, wonderful.
And there's the most
wonderful.
beautiful sequence, there really, really is, you know, and I can't give much away, but it's
great.
really lovely, it has everything, it's gorgeous.
You're married, of course, to the creator and writer of Call the Midwives, Heidi Thomas. I mean, she must put a hell of a lot of research into it when she's thinking about the things to pick up on in a given year. What are the sorts of things that happened in 1967? I obviously recall 1966 and the World Cup that summer. Can't really think about 1967. When we get to 68, I know obviously in the United States of America it was a tumultuous year.
Exit the roundabout onto Tuns Lane.
Martin Luther King and others who lost their lives. Can you remind us what happened in 1967?
Well, what Heidi...
Continue on A355 for 1 mile.
A great ally in some Officer for Health reports that would happen all the way through. And back in London at that time, when she first goes upstairs with the blank sheets of paper to do these things, she starts with the Office of the Health reports. Now they were on a district by district basis in London, so Poplar had its own. And the wonderful thing about these reports is there's lots of dry statistics in there about incidences of certain infectious diseases, but it also covers the social sides of health, the housing crises, the rebuilding crisis, and poverty, if there was problems with the water. And the best part of this is you had narrative reports. So you had the Office of Health then writing a large narrative, personal perspective, if you like, each year on the things that happened at that time. So Heidi looks at them and she said there's always real nuggets of something inside. Like on one year there was a case of suspected smallpox in the district, and she was able to use that in her stories. And then there's something else. But of course you've got Britain at this time in a real period of tumultuous change. The hippies are in by
Continue for 1.5 miles.
It's getting a bit more psychedelic. And of course, if you remember, there are also, socially, as well as the house clearance scheme, there's still great poverty in the 60s in Poplar at that time, and infectious diseases that come from that, but also the social problems when drug use starts to increase, where you've still got the old enemies of vagrancy, so you have all of these mixes of social problems still interacting with the white to technology in the government at that time. So a lot of things are more modern, television's coming on, things have changed, but some things never change. In places like Poplar, just like my hometown of Liverpool, there were parts that were changing rapidly, there were parts that were still stuck in an enormous Victorian past. So that's a very interesting cusp. And then you have the 60s itself. So you have, I think, one thing which makes us very lucky as a show is we're in the most tumultuous era of progress and change, possibly the greatest decade ever for it. So all of these rules are coming through thick and fast. Of course, if you think about the legality of homosexuality happened and slowly increasing women's rights throughout the 60s. You have the abortion bill, which is passing through at this time, not yet fully enacted, but it's going through. Of course, in the 60s, we stopped capital punishment. And you think about this decade as a whole, it's the most fantastic era of rapid change. And what we're doing is we're going back to the time and saying, what bits were going through at this time? How did that affect those people on that street? And can we tell a micro story of people whose stories maybe have never been properly told? Let's tell their stories, how it might have affected this individual family. So there's so much to tell in the end.
That was Stephen McGann, the actor who plays Dr. Turner in the series Call the Midwife, speaking to me earlier this month. No doubt you'll be tuning in a little later, as I will be. Back to your calls on hope for the future in light of the Queen's message earlier today. I've got some text messages here. Tammy says, David, my biggest hope is to see a Labour government installed. Thanks for restoring some hope to this soul. And that's from Tammy. And another message here from Vim, who says, my great hope is that COVID can be resolved and that I and a large minority of people can recover, like many others, from agoraphobia and panic attacks, to start living again instead of existing in a tiny room in fear of getting the virus. Very, very poignant, Vim. And there's lots of listeners who maybe have OCD, maybe have bipolar, agoraphobia, a whole range of different mental health challenges, and the last 2 years has just been triggering, really, really triggering, and it is my sincere hope that we're able to move into a new place. Michael in Beckenham. Michael, thank you for calling in.
Thank you for having me. Wow. Just knowing that this number was here and that I could call has given me so much hope. I really resonate with what your last text message was about.